When we think about international influence and power projection, our minds often drift toward advanced weaponry, cutting-edge technology, or economic sanctions. We imagine diplomatic summits in gleaming conference rooms and billion-dollar infrastructure deals. But what if I told you that one of the most profound transformations happening in the Pacific right now started with something far more humble, a mushroom? Welcome to the story of Papua New Guinea, a nation of 9 million people scattered across hundreds of islands in the southwestern Pacific Ocean. This is a country that has been shaped by centuries of colonial exploitation, plagued by tribal conflicts, and trapped in cycles of poverty that seemed impossible to break. Yet today, over 120,000 people in this remote archipelago nation are building new lives, escaping generational poverty, and creating sustainable businesses, all thanks to an agricultural partnership that began in 1998 and continues to this day. This isn't your typical development story. There are no massive dams, no sprawling highways, no gleaming skyscrapers. Instead, this is a story about soil, climate, patience, and the transformative power of teaching someone not just to survive, but to thrive. So how did growing mushrooms become a lifeline for one of the world's most overlooked nations? And what lessons does this quiet success story hold for international development everywhere? If you're interested in stories about international cooperation, sustainable development, and the surprising ways nations help each other grow, make sure to subscribe and hit the notification bell. You won't want to miss what comes next. Let's begin. Papua New Guinea occupies a unique position on our planet. Covering approximately 462,800 square kilometers, an area slightly larger than California, this archipelago sits just north of Australia, straddling crucial maritime routes that connect the vast Pacific Ocean with the Indian Ocean beyond. For centuries, this strategic location made it a prize worth fighting over. The Dutch arrived first, planting their flag and claiming territory. Then came the French, followed by the British, and eventually the Germans. Each colonial power extracted what they could: resources, labor, strategic advantage, while leaving behind fractured societies and artificial borders that cut through traditional tribal lands. When Papua New Guinea finally achieved independence on September 16, 1975, it inherited a complex legacy that continues to shape the nation today. Imagine trying to build a modern nation-state in a country where more than 800 distinct languages are spoken, where approximately 87% of the population lives in rural areas, and where tribal systems of governance remain stronger than central government authority in many regions. Add to this equation the lingering trauma of colonialism, limited infrastructure, and widespread access to firearms, a deadly remnant of various conflicts, and you begin to understand the challenges facing Papua New Guinea. By the late 1990s, the average citizen in Papua New Guinea earned less than $10 per day. Many communities remained isolated in mountainous terrain, accessible only by foot or small aircraft. Violence between tribal groups flared regularly, making economic development nearly impossible in affected areas. The government struggled to provide basic services like education, healthcare, and law enforcement across such diverse and difficult terrain. The industrial sector barely existed. Agriculture, which employed the vast majority of the population, remained trapped in subsistence-level production. Farmers grew enough to feed their families, but rarely enough to sell at market. The cycle of poverty seemed unbreakable. To its credit, the international community didn't ignore Papua New Guinea's struggles. Australia, as the nearest wealthy neighbor, stepped up with significant financial commitments. Since 1975, Australian aid to Papua New Guinea has exceeded $800 million, funding everything from schools and hospitals to government capacity-building programs and infrastructure projects. The European Union also contributed substantially, providing approximately €200 million primarily focused on educational reform and rural development. These weren't small gestures. They represented genuine attempts to help Papua New Guinea build the foundations of a functioning modern economy. Yet despite these massive injections of aid money, fundamental problems persisted. Roads built with foreign funding often fell into disrepair without proper maintenance systems. Schools opened, but teacher training remained inadequate. Clinics were constructed, but medical supplies ran short. The aid helped, certainly, but it didn't create the self-sustaining economic growth that Papua New Guinea desperately needed. Why? Because traditional aid often treats symptoms rather than causes. Building a school is valuable, but if the local economy can't provide jobs for educated graduates, they'll migrate to cities or other countries. Constructing a clinic matters, but if malnutrition remains widespread due to food insecurity, the health problems never truly disappear. What Papua New Guinea needed wasn't just aid, it needed economic transformation from the ground up. It needed sustainable industries that could employ people, generate income, and create positive feedback loops of development. And that's exactly what nobody seemed able to provide. Until 1997, when nature forced the issue. The drought that struck Papua New Guinea in 1997 was catastrophic. Rivers that communities depended on for water and transportation began to dry up. Crops withered in fields. Food prices skyrocketed as supplies dwindled. What had been chronic food insecurity suddenly became acute famine. The numbers were staggering. Tens of thousands of people faced immediate starvation. The government, already struggling with limited resources and capacity, couldn't respond effectively. International food aid poured in, but everyone recognized this was merely a band-aid solution. When the emergency passed, the underlying vulnerability would remain. Papua New Guinea's government began reaching out to international partners, searching for solutions beyond emergency food shipments. They needed agricultural innovation, ways to grow more food, more reliably, in their challenging climate. They needed expertise in developing crops that could withstand environmental stress. They needed partners who would stay long enough to see real transformation. Among those who answered the call was China. In 1998, a team of Chinese agricultural technicians landed in Papua New Guinea with a specific mission: assess the local conditions and identify opportunities for sustainable agricultural development. This wasn't China's first agricultural assistance program. Chinese experts had been helping developing nations improve food security for decades. But, each location presents unique challenges that require careful study. The team spent weeks traveling across Papua New Guinea, collecting soil samples, measuring rainfall patterns, studying temperature fluctuations, and speaking with local farmers about their traditional growing practices. They cataloged what grew well and what struggled. They noted which areas flooded during the rainy season and which suffered from poor drainage. What they discovered was, honestly, fascinating. Despite Papua New Guinea's challenges, the soil quality in many areas was actually excellent, rich in organic matter and minerals. The climate, while humid and sometimes extreme, wasn't fundamentally incompatible with productive agriculture. The problem wasn't that nothing could grow here. The problem was that nobody had yet identified the right crops and the right techniques for this specific environment. Then the Chinese team noticed something promising. The humidity, the temperature ranges, the soil composition, all of it matched conditions they had seen elsewhere, conditions where a particular crop thrived spectacularly. That crop was mushrooms. More specifically, they recognized that Papua New Guinea's environment could support cultivation of edible fungi using a revolutionary Chinese technology called Juncao, literally translated as grass mushroom technology. To understand why the Chinese team got so excited about mushrooms, you need to understand what makes Juncao technology special. Developed in China in 1986 by Professor Lin Zhangxi at Fujian Agriculture and Forestry University, Juncao represented a breakthrough in sustainable mushroom cultivation. Traditionally, growing mushrooms at scale required wood, lots of it. Mushroom farmers would cut down trees, chip the wood, sterilize it, and use it as a substrate for mushroom growth. This method worked but created serious environmental problems. In areas where mushroom farming became popular, deforestation accelerated dramatically. The economic benefits of mushroom cultivation were undermined by ecological destruction. Professor Lin's insight was elegant. Instead of using wood, why not use grass? Specifically, he developed techniques for using various fast-growing grass species as substrates for mushroom cultivation. These grasses could be harvested multiple times per year without killing the plant, making the process infinitely more sustainable than cutting trees. The results were extraordinary. When implemented correctly, Juncao technology could produce over 25 tons of mushrooms per acre annually. A single planting of the grass substrate could continue producing for more than 15 years. Farmers could harvest multiple crops throughout the year, creating consistent income rather than seasonal windfalls. For Papua New Guinea, this technology seemed almost too good to be true. Mushrooms are nutritionally dense, packed with protein, vitamins, and minerals. They grow quickly, reaching harvest size in weeks rather than months. They require relatively little space, meaning even small landholders could participate. And crucially, they could generate significant income, both from domestic sales and from export markets. But knowing mushrooms could theoretically grow in Papua New Guinea and actually getting them to thrive there proved to be two very different challenges. When the Chinese technical team began establishing demonstration mushroom farms in Papua New Guinea, they immediately encountered an unexpected problem. The mushrooms were growing, but not as vigorously as they should. Yields were disappointing, well below what the same techniques produced in other locations. After careful observation, they identified the culprit: nighttime humidity. Papua New Guinea's nights were so humid that moisture collected inside the growing facilities, creating conditions that actually inhibited optimal mushroom development. Too much of a good thing had become a problem. This is where the Juncao technology really proved its value. The Chinese experts adjusted their approach, fine-tuning the grass substrate preparation, modifying the growing structure designs to improve air circulation, and adjusting watering schedules to account for the ambient humidity. Slowly but surely, yields began to improve, but an even bigger challenge loomed: sterilization. Successful mushroom cultivation requires sterile conditions during the substrate preparation phase. Contamination by competing fungi or bacteria can destroy an entire batch. Commercial mushroom operations use autoclave sterilization equipment, essentially giant pressure cookers, that cost approximately $12,000 each. For subsistence farmers in Papua New Guinea earning less than $10 per day, a $12,000 piece of equipment might as well cost $1 million. It simply wasn't accessible. If sterilization equipment was necessary for success, then mushroom cultivation would remain limited to whoever received donated equipment, rather than spreading organically as farmers taught their neighbors. The Chinese agricultural experts refused to accept this limitation. Drawing on decades of experience making do with limited resources, they developed an ingenious low-cost sterilization system using materials available in any Papua New Guinea village: 3 empty gasoline barrels, some stones, and basic metal framework. This improvised sterilizer worked on the same basic principle as expensive commercial equipment, using heat and steam to kill contaminants, but cost a tiny fraction of the price. Farmers could build one themselves with minimal investment. It democratized the technology, making mushroom cultivation accessible to anyone willing to learn, regardless of their economic starting point. This is the kind of innovation that never makes headlines, but changes lives. It's the difference between a development project that helps a few hundred people and one that transforms 120,000 lives. Building an industry from nothing is honestly no small feat. From 1998 to 2024, China's Mushroom Cultivation Assistance Program in Papua New Guinea has operated continuously for 26 years. This longevity itself is, well, pretty remarkable. Most international development projects run for 3 to 5 years before funding ends and foreign experts leave. But China committed to the long haul, recognizing that building sustainable industries takes time, patience, and, of course, consistent support. The transformation has been nothing short of remarkable. In 1998, Papua New Guinea's commercial mushroom production was basically zero. Today, the country produces approximately 1,000 tons of mushrooms per hectare in established cultivation areas. More importantly, mushroom farming has evolved from a pilot project into a genuine industry with its own ecosystem. Around 120,000 Papua New Guineans are now involved in mushroom cultivation at various scales. Some are small-scale growers with just a few mushroom houses, selling their harvest at local markets. Others have expanded into medium-sized operations, employing neighbors and supplying restaurants and grocery stores. The most successful have built fully integrated businesses that grow, process, package, and export mushrooms to markets across Asia and the Pacific. This vertical integration matters enormously. When farmers can move beyond raw production into processing and value-added activities, they capture more of the profit margin. A farmer selling fresh mushrooms might earn a modest income. A farmer who dries, packages, and brands those mushrooms can earn several times more from the same harvest. Papua New Guinea's geographical position has proven advantageous here. Located along major Pacific shipping routes, the country has relatively easy access to export markets in Australia, New Zealand, Southeast Asia, and East Asia. As quality standards improved and production scaled up, Papua New Guinea mushrooms began appearing in international markets, bringing foreign currency into the local economy. But perhaps the most important aspect of this success isn't the mushrooms themselves, it's the knowledge transfer. Chinese experts didn't just grow mushrooms and sell them. They trained Papua New Guinean farmers, teaching them every step of the process. Those farmers then trained their relatives and neighbors. Agricultural extension officers learned the techniques and spread them to new regions. A culture of knowledge sharing developed around mushroom cultivation. Today, many Papua New Guinean mushroom farmers operate independently without ongoing Chinese assistance. They've mastered the techniques, adapted them to local conditions, and even developed their own innovations. This self-sufficiency is the ultimate goal of any development assistance, the point where the training wheels come off and people ride forward on their own momentum. Beyond mushrooms, there was another leap forward, the rice revolution. Despite the remarkable success of mushroom cultivation, Chinese agricultural experts recognized a fundamental limitation. Mushrooms, however nutritious and profitable, couldn't serve as a staple food crop. They're an excellent supplement and a valuable cash crop, but you can't build food security on mushrooms alone. Papua New Guinea needed grain production, specifically rice, which forms the foundation of food security across much of Asia and the Pacific. But there was a problem. Papua New Guinea is an archipelago with limited flat land suitable for traditional flooded rice paddies. The terrain is mountainous, the soil conditions vary wildly, and water control infrastructure barely exists outside a few areas. Traditional lowland rice cultivation wasn't going to work, so the Chinese team pivoted to upland rice. Upland rice varieties have been bred to grow in well-drained soils without flooding, making them ideal for hilly terrain and areas without irrigation infrastructure. They require less water management and can be integrated into existing agricultural systems more easily than paddy rice. For Papua New Guinea, upland rice offered a path to grain self-sufficiency that worked with the country's geography rather than against it. The Chinese agricultural program established 6 upland rice cultivation demonstration bases in strategic locations across Papua New Guinea. These weren't massive industrial farms, but rather working examples designed to show local farmers what was possible. Nearly 1,000 villagers from surrounding communities participated in the initial planting efforts, learning by doing under the guidance of Chinese experts. China provided over 1,000 kilograms of high-quality upland rice seeds, specifically selected for tropical conditions. The experts taught farmers how to prepare the soil, when to plant, how to manage pests without expensive chemicals, and how to harvest and store the grain properly to minimize losses. The results exceeded expectations. The upland rice cultivation area expanded to 150 hectares, yielding approximately 10 tons per hectare. For communities that had depended on imported rice or lived on the edge of food insecurity, the ability to grow their own grain represented transformative change. Farmers who grew upland rice achieved something more valuable than food security for their own families. They gained a marketable surplus. Extra rice could be sold locally or in nearby towns, generating income while also stabilizing local food prices. The economic and nutritional benefits reinforced each other in a positive feedback loop. One farmer interviewed by local media described the change simply, "Before, we worried every season whether we would have enough. Now we know we will eat, and we have rice to sell. My children go to school instead of working in the fields all day because we can afford it. That's development that matters." From agriculture to industry, the broader partnership between China and Papua New Guinea took on new dimensions. The success of China's agricultural programs in Papua New Guinea created something intangible but crucial: trust. When you help a nation feed itself, when you commit to long-term partnership rather than short-term projects, when you demonstrate genuine concern for people's well-being, you build relationships that extend beyond agriculture. Papua New Guinea's government took notice. If Chinese expertise could transform mushroom production and rice cultivation from zero to thriving industries, what else might be possible? What other resources and opportunities in Papua New Guinea were waiting for the right partners to unlock them? Papua New Guinea possesses substantial mineral wealth, including significant nickel and cobalt deposits. These metals are essential for modern electronics, electric vehicle batteries, and renewable energy systems, making them strategically and economically valuable. But developing mineral resources requires massive capital investment, advanced technical expertise, and access to global markets. In recognition of China's agricultural contributions and hoping to deepen economic ties, Papua New Guinea invited the China Metallurgical Construction Group to jointly develop the Lamu nickel and cobalt mining project. The investment commitment reached $1.3 billion, making it the single largest Chinese investment in any Pacific Island nation, and the largest foreign direct investment Papua New Guinea had received since gaining independence. This wasn't just about extracting minerals and shipping them away. The agreement included provisions for local employment, skills training, infrastructure development, and environmental protections. It represented a more sophisticated model of resource development partnership, where the host nation actively participates in value creation rather than simply selling raw materials. Similarly, in 2009, the China National Petroleum Corporation signed a long-term natural gas purchase agreement with Papua New Guinea's LNG project. Papua New Guinea has substantial natural gas reserves, and China needs energy resources to power its growing economy. The deal provided Papua New Guinea with a reliable buyer and revenue stream while giving China access to resources it needs. These major industrial investments might seem disconnected from mushroom cultivation, but they're part of the same story. The agricultural programs opened doors, demonstrated China's commitment to mutually beneficial partnership, and proved that collaboration between China and Papua New Guinea could produce tangible results. Industrial investment followed the path that agricultural cooperation had paved. The development model that works, well, it's not just about what happened in Papua New Guinea, but how it happened. The approach offers lessons that challenge conventional wisdom about international development. First, the focus on agriculture and food security proved that you can't build prosperity on an empty stomach. Before Papua New Guinea could meaningfully industrialize or develop service sectors, it needed to solve the fundamental problem of feeding its people. Starting with agriculture wasn't a stopgap, it was strategic. Second, the emphasis on appropriate technology made all the difference. The Chinese experts didn't arrive with high-tech solutions that required constant foreign support and expensive inputs. They brought techniques that could be mastered by farmers with limited formal education, using materials available locally. The improvised sterilization equipment made from gasoline barrels perfectly exemplifies this approach: effective, affordable, and replicable without foreign assistance. Third, the commitment to long-term partnership rather than short-term projects allowed time for real capacity building. 26 years is an eternity in the world of development assistance, where funding cycles typically run 3 to 5 years. This extended commitment meant Chinese experts could train Papua New Guineans, who then trained others, creating self-sustaining knowledge transfer. Fourth, the focus on export potential and income generation transformed assistance into economic development. It's one thing to help people grow food for themselves. It's another thing entirely to help them build businesses that generate income, employ neighbors, and contribute to the broader economy. The mushroom industry didn't just feed people, it created entrepreneurs. Finally, the approach respected Papua New Guinea's agency and ownership. Chinese experts provided knowledge and training, but Papua New Guineans did the actual work of building industries. The success belongs to the farmers who worked the land, took risks on new techniques, and built businesses.